Welcome back. In this video, you're going to get a complete review and a full understanding of one of the most unusual sports cars still being built by human hands today. We're covering everything that actually matters here: the exterior design, the interior, the technology, the performance, the real driving experience, how practical it is to actually own, the genuine strengths, the honest weaknesses, the pricing, whether it represents real value for money, and how it stacks up against the competition it's been quietly outclassing for years. Stay with me until the end, because by the time we're done, you'll have a complete picture of this car and a few details you probably haven't heard anywhere else. Picture a small factory in the English countryside in a town called Malvern, where cars are still built the way they were built 100 years ago. Wooden frames are shaped by hand. Aluminum panels are hammered and fitted by craftsmen who've spent decades learning a trade that barely exists anywhere else in the world. And into that century-old process, engineers quietly slipped something nobody expected: a modern, turbocharged BMW engine, a genuinely advanced aluminum chassis, and just enough contemporary thinking to make the car dangerous to underestimate. That car is the Morgan Plus 6. And what makes this particular moment interesting is timing. This isn't just a review, this is the closing chapter. Morgan has already begun handing the flagship torch to a new car, the Supersport, which means the Plus 6 we're talking about today is the version that got everything right before bowing out. There's something worth understanding in that. A car this good doesn't get remembered by accident. Let's start with what hits you first, because with a Morgan, it's always the way it looks. The silhouette is instantly familiar, even if you've never seen one in person. Flowing front fenders that curve independently over each wheel, a long sloped bonnet, headlights that sit low and wide like something pulled from a 1930s racetrack. But here's the twist. Underneath that vintage shape is a thoroughly modern aluminum structure, wider and more assertive than the smaller Plus 4 sitting next to it in the showroom. It doesn't look retro because someone got lazy with the design brief. It looks retro because Morgan understood something most manufacturers forgot: that presence and character can matter more than aerodynamic efficiency. People don't stop and stare at this car because it's fast. They stop because it looks like nothing else on the road, and in a world of near-identical crossovers, that alone is worth something. Step inside and the story continues in a different key. This is a cabin stitched together by hand, wrapped in leather that's been cut and fitted individually, not stamped out on an assembly line. You'll notice a locking compartment behind the seats, a small but thoughtful touch for a car with almost no boot space. The dashboard mixes analog dials with a subtle digital display in front of the driver, and Morgan partnered with Sennheiser to build a sound system using invisible speakers hidden in the door panels, creating audio that feels like it's coming from the air itself rather than a speaker grill. It's not a spacious cabin, and it was never meant to be. It's intimate, almost theatrical, designed to make two people feel like they're piloting something rather than simply sitting in it. Now, technology is where this car makes an interesting statement. There's no giant touchscreen dominating the dashboard, no endless menus, no artificial intelligence assistant chiming in about traffic. Morgan made a deliberate choice here, and it's worth pausing on. In an era where cars are becoming rolling tablets, the Plus 6 strips things back to buttons you can actually feel and understand. Climate controls sit beneath the dash, straightforward and tactile. Driver assistance technology is minimal by modern standards. You won't find the elaborate safety suites that come standard on a mainstream German sedan. That's a genuine trade-off. And if you're someone who leans on adaptive cruise control or lane keep assist every day, this car will feel like stepping back in time. But that's precisely the point. Morgan is betting that some buyers still want to drive the car themselves, fully, without a computer quietly correcting their inputs. Underneath that classic bonnet sits the real surprise, a 3.0-litre turbocharged inline-six sourced from BMW, the same engine family found in cars like the Z4 and the 3 Series. It produces around 335 horsepower, sent through an 8-speed automatic to the rear wheels, and because the whole car weighs barely over 1,100 kilograms, that power hits differently than it would in something heavier. 0 to 60 comes in around 4 seconds, and the top speed sits close to 166 miles per hour, but raw numbers barely explain what makes this car special. It's the way the power arrives. This isn't a car that needs to be thrashed to feel alive. Even pulling away gently from a stoplight, there's an urgency to it, a sense that the engine is barely being asked to try. On the road is really where you understand what Morgan spent all this effort protecting. There's minimal sound insulation, so you hear the road, you feel every texture of the tarmac, and the steering talks back constantly instead of staying numb and isolated. Compare that to something like a Porsche 718 Cayman, which is faster in a straight line and more forgiving at the limit, or a BMW Z4 wearing the exact same engine but wrapped in a far more comfortable, far more insulated package. Both of those cars are objectively easier to live with daily. Neither delivers this particular sensation, a kind of unfiltered connection to the machine that modern engineering has spent 30 years trying to smooth away. Drive a +6 back-to-back with almost anything else in this price range, and the difference isn't subtle. It's the difference between watching a thunderstorm through a window and standing in one. Of course, all of that honesty comes with real compromises. Practicality is not this car's strength. There's nowhere to put luggage beyond that small, lockable cubby. The ride can be firm over rough British back roads, and everyday usability takes a back seat to feel. Ownership is its own experience entirely. Every +6 is essentially bespoke, built to order with wait times that stretch on for months, sometimes longer. But in exchange, owners get something rare in the modern car world: genuine exclusivity and remarkably strong resale value. A 4-year-old example can still command close to what it originally cost, which tells you something about how tightly Morgan controls supply and how loyal its buyer base really is. Pricing starts around £90,000, but let's be honest, almost nobody buys one without options, and a realistically specified car lands closer to £110,000. That's significantly more than a BMW Z4 with literally the same engine underneath, and it edges close to Porsche 718 territory too. So is it worth it? That depends entirely on what you're actually buying. If you're purchasing horsepower per pound, the +6 loses that argument immediately. But if you're purchasing a hand-built, low-volume piece of British engineering history, something only a few hundred people a year will ever own, the calculation changes completely. Value in this case isn't measured in lap times, it's measured in rarity. Which brings us to where this car actually sits in the market. It isn't really competing with the 718 Cayman or the Alpine A110 on paper, even though enthusiasts cross-shop all three. It's competing with the idea of an alternative altogether, a rejection of the modern sports car formula in favor of something more analog, more theatrical, more personal. Against a Z4, it wins on charisma and loses on comfort. Against a Cayman, it wins on emotion and loses on outright ability. Against a Caterham or an Ariel Atom, it actually feels like the practical, comfortable choice, which tells you everything about how wide this car's identity really stretches. So here's the overall picture. The Morgan +6 was never meant to be the fastest, the smartest, or the most sensible car in its class, and by the numbers alone, it isn't. But it might be one of the last genuinely honest sports cars built this way, wood and aluminum shaped by hand, wrapped around an engine that actually deserves the attention it demands. As Morgan moves forward with the Super Sport, this car closes out its run exactly the way it started, refusing to be like anything else on the road. That's rare, that's worth remembering. And if this kind of deep, honest car breakdown is something you enjoy, hit like, subscribe for more.